Today, we're going to dive into one of the most powerful allegories from the ancient world. It's the parable of the vineyard, from the first 7 verses of Isaiah chapter 5. Now, this is a story that starts out like a beautiful song, but you'll see, it ends as an absolutely stunning indictment. So let's break it down. All right, we're going to walk through this parable pretty much verse by verse, breaking it into 5 key parts. We'll start with the song that sets the whole stage. Then we'll see the dramatic turn when things go really wrong. We'll hear the owner's appeal for justice, witness the devastating consequences, and then, at the very end, we'll unlock the parable's true meaning. So, this story doesn't kick off with a big prophecy or some kind of stern warning. Nope. It starts gently, almost deceptively, as a song about a beloved friend and this incredible vineyard that he built. So right here in verse 1, the scene is immediately set for success. The owner is called My Well-Beloved, and the vineyard is planted on a very fruitful hill. I mean, you can't get better than that. This is prime real estate. Every possible condition is just perfect for an amazing harvest. And the sheer amount of effort that's described here in the start of verse 2 is, well, it's just incredible. The owner doesn't just, throw some seeds in the ground and hope for the best. He fences it for protection. He painstakingly clears all the stones. He plants not just any old vine, but the choicest vine. And on top of all that, he builds infrastructure, a tower and a wine press right in the middle of it. This isn't just an investment. This is a total labor of love. And you have to understand, each of these elements is just dripping with symbolism. According to historical interpretation, that choicest vine represents the chosen lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The tower, built to guard against enemies, well, that signifies the civil government that was meant to protect the people. And the wine press, designed to produce good wine, represents the law of Moses, which was intended to produce righteousness from the people. Seriously, every single advantage was given. So, after all that work, all that care, and all that perfect preparation, the owner has a very simple, very reasonable expectation. But this is where the song takes a sharp, dramatic turn. After everything he did, the result was not what he expected. And there it is, right in the second half of verse 2, the tragic punchline. He looked for good, cultivated grapes, the kind you make fine wine with. But instead, the vineyard produced wild grapes, these small, sour, bitter, and frankly, utterly useless things. The contrast couldn't be more stark. All that potential was just squandered, and the result was the exact opposite of what he was going for. Okay, so now the whole narrative shifts. The singer stops telling a story about his friend and instead starts speaking directly as his friend. And he doesn't just complain. He actually turns to the audience and asks them to act as a jury in this dispute. This line from verse 3 is just a brilliant rhetorical move. The original audience, the actual people of Jerusalem and Judah, are pulled directly into the story. They're being asked to judge the situation. The owner is so confident in his case that he's willing to let the vineyard's own people decide who's at fault here. And this brings us to the absolute central question of the parable, found in verse 4. The owner lays out his entire case with this one powerful, really unanswerable question. He's essentially asking, look, did I miss a step? Was there anything I failed to provide? And the implied answer, of course, is no. He did everything perfectly. So the crucial point is this. If the owner isn't at fault, the blame must lie with the vineyard itself. So, since the vineyard is guilty, a verdict has to be passed. The tone now shifts from this sorrowful plea to a straight-up declaration of judgment. The owner explains exactly what he is going to do to his failed vineyard. The first act of judgment, right from verse 5, is the complete removal of all protection. He says, I will take away the hedge and break down the wall. Everything he built to keep it safe is going to be dismantled. This will leave the vineyard completely vulnerable, to be eaten by wild animals and just trampled by anyone who happens to pass by. Now, the process laid out in verses 5 and 6 is systematic, and it is total. After removing the protective barriers, he will lay it waste, which means it won't be pruned or cultivated anymore. The source notes make a really key distinction here. This isn't just trimming back the bad parts. This is a complete removal of the entire vine. And then finally, even nature is commanded to abandon it. No rain will fall. It is a sentence of total and complete desolation.
All right, so up to this point, the audience has just been listening to a story, acting as a jury in a dispute over a vineyard. But now, in verse 7, the parable is finally unlocked. The metaphor is dropped, and it's revealed exactly who and what this song has been about the entire time.
And there it is, the big reveal. The well-beloved owner is the Lord of hosts. The carefully tended vineyard is the nation of Israel, and his pleasant plant, that choicest vine, is the men of Judah. The song was never about agriculture. It was about the relationship between God and his people.
So, what exactly were the wild grapes? Well, verse 7 tells us, plain and simple. God looked for judgment, fairness and justice in society, but instead, he beheld oppression. He looked for righteousness, people living in a right relationship with him and each other, but instead, he heard a cry.
And what is that cry? It's not just a sound of general sadness. The source material defines it very specifically as the cry of the victims. It's the sound of the most vulnerable people, the widows, the orphans, the poor, appealing directly to God because they can find no help, no justice from the very people who were supposed to protect them. So let's put it all together. The entire allegory is now decoded. The vineyard is Israel, the plant is Judah, and the bad fruit, those wild grapes, was the social injustice of oppression and the cries of the helpless, a direct violation of the righteousness God expected. And let's be super clear, this wasn't just some hypothetical story. According to the source, the parable serves as a kind of abbreviated allegory for the actual history of Israel, from its establishment way back around 1000 BC to the coming destruction of Jerusalem, which would happen in 587 BC. The warning was real, and the consequences were right around the corner. In the end, this ancient parable leaves us with a pretty profound question that just echoes through time. After every advantage is given, every opportunity provided, when expectation, whether it's divine or human, collides with a bitter reality, what truly comes next? It's a question of accountability, of consequence, and the tragic cost of squandered potential. Definitely something to think about.